Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with my review of Superman 2025 edition. This is, of course, written and directed by James Gunn, and a movie that's getting, just a little bit of attention, just a few eyes on the movie itself and how it's going to perform and how it's going to be received. No pressure at all. Just a ton of attention because it is this relaunch of the DC universe on screen. I know Creature Commandos was kind of the soft relaunch, but the big relaunch, after, the last cinematic iteration had some big highs and lows and ended not that long ago. So here we are with this sort of big, huge reboot in a way we haven't seen yet in the era of the cinematic universe. Can you just reboot everything this quickly after, discard almost everything that iteration had, for better or for worse? And I think the end result is pretty great. I love this movie. I had a great time with this movie. As a lifelong comic book fan, I think that this movie feels like a comic book movie in a way that we still haven't seen that much, which is crazy. I know we have seen dozens of comic book movies at this point, and yet this still manages to capture something that you don't often see in these films. David Cornsweet stars here as Superman, who is a pretty well-established version of the Man of Steel. He's been protecting Metropolis and the world at large for about 3 years, and Lex Luthor despises him and goes about with a plan to discredit him and to try to turn the world against him, which in turn amplifies a bit of an international crisis Superman had already involved himself in that was already becoming a much debated topic. Gunn, of course, is known for comic book movies. This is his fifth, and yet at the same time, he usually deals with very irreverent characters, often foul-mouthed characters, often violent characters. So it's a pretty big switch for him to tackle the ultimate do-gooder with Superman, but I think he nails it. He never tries to subvert it. He never tries to either undercut who Superman is or be winking about it or feel embarrassed at all, certainly. There's nothing, feeling ashamed or like we can't just do Superman the way Superman is. This is a very pure version of Superman that will instantly evoke, the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve version, who, remains one of the most, I think, sort of perfect casting and also just representation of a superhero ever. One that's really completely defined Superman in the public's mind, for decades and decades now. But I think he does an excellent job of evoking that while also bringing his own thing to it, because feels very different from the Donner movie in a lot of ways as well. A thing here that, really stands out is how much this completely embraces all the comic book trappings. Tonally, this movie reminded me a lot of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films. It felt the most similar as far as a very earnest approach. Sometimes a corny approach in a lovable way, because it was sort of unapologetic about being based on this comic book and kind of everything that goes with that, including sort of the silly nonsense of it all. And again, I freaking love comic books. I say silly nonsense with affection, with love, understanding that this is, stuff when you try to explain a comic book plot to some people who don't read comics and they're looking at you going, what the hell is going on? This movie just presents it all. And I think it's really commendable how it does that. I do wonder if maybe some people won't be for them, because I think that we're so used to comic book movies for sure. And now the public, mainstream audience, they understand these characters and these concepts way more than they used to. At the same time, there's always this kind of thing they do, not always, but most of the time, they kind of use this way to build yourself in. They use a character, right? The outsider who goes in, or they use the slow build, a regular Joe becoming a superpowered character, so they get to have this moment of what's happening to me. Then, of course, there's the ironic detachment. There are the self-deprecating jokes. There is the dialogue you might do to be like, this is crazy. This sounds like out of a wacky comic book. All those things that they put in that I sometimes get very criticized. Like, hey, just let it go. Just present it as is. This movie, that's what they do. They just present it as is. I do think sometimes there's a reason that they do that slow build, and that this movie discarding it, even though it gets, I think it's going to work way more for more people than it would have, say, 20 years ago, pre a million comic book movies. It still might, not work for everyone because it's so wholeheartedly embracing it all. But I don't know. I think for a lot of us, certainly for me, it's so fun, and the movie itself is so lovable that it's easy to jump in when you are getting everything from Crypto, the flying superdog, to the Superman robots, the helper robots who wear Superman capes in the Fortress of Solitude. This is all really wonderfully, beautifully silly stuff that I'm so happy is in this movie, and it certainly felt a few years ago like it would never be in a Superman movie. That is not the direction they were going a while back. But here they're all in, right? They're all like, this is a big, goofy comic book world with big, crazy, awesome concepts that are just super, no pun intended, outlandish, but why not? Let's just go for it. Let's embrace it all. And James Gunn is someone who himself was raised on comic books. Clearly, he loves all that. He has a big affection for it. And he goes in on it in a way he already did in his other comic book movies, but without any of that sort of cynicism or irony or the attitude that those other characters have, because this is Superman, who is a very pure of heart character. I think the best thing I can say about David Cornsweet's performance is I barely thought about it as a performance, which is to say, I think he did exactly what you hope from an actor playing Superman. He felt like he's Superman. There is a reason that they typically cast either a complete unknown or a mostly unknown actor as Superman. There is something about that character and that role that is so bigger than life and so needs you to buy into what he is, that it's asking a lot. If it's a big star wearing a Superman costume, it feels like a big star wearing a Superman costume. And Cornsweet, who, by the way, I'm pretty familiar with because I love Pearl and I've seen it a million times, but he just completely, he becomes Clark Kent. He becomes Kal-El. He becomes Superman. You believe him. You believe what he is saying in that costume. You believe everything about sort of the attitude he brings of this character, who, by the way, I should say is not presented as like perfect, as someone who is never wrong and makes no mistakes. And I think the movie has some interesting scenes that deal with the fact that, maybe he's not always making the right call. And he is someone who's very powerful, who is making decisions that not everyone's going to agree with. And I think the movie even presents here's why it's understandable that some people would have issues with that are not Lex Luthor. But you just completely believe him as Superman. And he has a great scene partner in Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. These two have really great chemistry together, whether that means that they are bantering or actually fighting. They get to be genuinely sexy together in a way we don't always see in superhero movies. No, there's not a sex scene, but they feel like a sexy couple together who are into each other. It's funny, Gunn makes sure that when they kiss, it's like a big, long kiss. In a way that I actually thought was really fun, because it's like, these people really dig each other. As Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult seems to be having a lot of fun and is great as always. I did feel like the movie could have maybe gotten to Lex's underlining motivations a bit earlier, just because he does spend a lot of the first half of the film as the evil guy. But we certainly believe his hatred of Superman. There's actually something I really did appreciate about the fact that this Lex, he's kind of furious with Superman. He really despises him and his mere, not just his presence, but his existence. It insults him in a way that I think Holt is able to really kind of dig into and have a lot of fun with. There have been some understandable worries in the lead up to Superman that the addition of multiple villains, including the Engineer and Ultraman on top of Lex Luthor, and then other superheroes like Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, and Metamorpho, was beginning to feel like a movie that could be way overstuffed. It's not. These characters, I think, are there to serve a purpose, which they do, which is to let you understand that this is a fully sort of lived-in superhero universe. This is what I'm saying about how it evokes the Raimi Spider-Man movie, but like amplified, because the Raimi Spider-Man movie only had to sell us on Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, and it seemed like there had never been superheroes around in this world. But this is saying there's a million superheroes and a million supervillains around in this world, and they're very commonplace. And all these characters, I think, help let you understand that, populate the world of these characters. They never overwhelm the story. You always understand this is Superman's story, Superman's personal story of what he's going through, how he is processing information that Luthor brings up that really sort of digs deep for him, and what he does about that. And I never felt like, oh no, there's too many heroes, too many villains, too many storylines. It's not. They are there and they have their moments, but they don't overwhelm the movie. That being said, amongst all these other characters, it is clearly Eddie Gathie's Mr. Terrific, who is the obvious standout because he is meant to be the standout. He has a lot more screen time and he figures into the plot way more than those other heroes in the film. It is clear that Gunn wanted people to come out of this movie thinking Mr. Terrific is cool, and I think mission accomplished. I certainly know I thought Mr. Terrific was cool. I think a lot of people are going to be cosplaying this character and really into this character after this movie. And yes, there is a little bit of a meta aspect here, just because if you know Eddie Gathie's history in comic book movies and the fact that he was in the otherwise great X-Men First Class in a role that not only wasted him but also killed off his character in a way that felt very both unceremonious but also unfair to the character and what should be able to take him out or not take him out. This seems kind of like him finally getting his due in a comic book movie in a great way. If anyone seems set up here for bigger and better things more than anyone else, it's Mr. Terrific. It feels like if they announce a Mr. Terrific TV show next week, I wouldn't be surprised and I would welcome it. On the flip side, in a movie that has a lot of characters, but I think does a good job of giving almost everyone like at least one little moment, something to pop, something to shine, something to kind of look towards the future. Probably the person who's the most underserved amongst the superhero characters specifically is Isabella Merced as Hawk Girl. She kind of gets the least to do, Guy Gardner, played by Nathan Fillion, he certainly gets to be sarcastic and funny, and Anthony Carrigan as Metamorpho gets some emotional moments. She's a little bit the one that's just kind of there for now. I'm sure we're going to see the character again. Well, of course I'm sure, because I've seen her in the trailer to Peacemaker season 2, but beyond that, but she does feel like a little bit extraneous compared to the others. And amongst the Daily Planet crew, while some of them certainly are smaller roles and they are meant to be and should be, it does feel like the great Wendell Pierce should have gotten more as Perry White. Just a character that, is a pretty important character in Superman mythos. And it just feels like we're lacking like the one big Perry scene. We need a scene in his office because we only see him in the bullpen at the Daily Planet. I wanted to see a scene where Clark goes in to talk to him in the office and we get, some sort of Perry speech, some sort of moment that sort of stood out a little more. But look, these quibbles aside, I thought that Superman was a blast. I thought that it was just a very fun and exhilarating movie. The action is really exciting and dynamic. Gunn, of course, is always great with his use of songs. He doesn't go as heavy here as he does in other movies. It wouldn't make sense to in a Superman movie, but when he does choose a couple songs to play, they are perfect. And sometimes, it's very surprising, but work really well in a way you wouldn't expect. I just really had a great time with this. I've seen it twice now. First time I saw it in a regular movie theater. Second time I saw it in IMAX. I really wanted to see it in IMAX and kind of see those visuals. And it did really pop and made some great use, I thought, of IMAX. But I don't think that's necessary to enjoy the movie. I think this movie is sort of old school in a lot of ways. That completely work. Superman is often seen as an old-fashioned character, even though Batman is almost just as old. He's not seen as old-fashioned the same way, and I understand why and all the dynamics. This movie embraces that Superman's old-fashioned, but also shows how he can be a very fun, exciting, interesting character. And be old-fashioned. And the movie is very aware of how people perceive Superman. Part of the plot involves how people perceive Superman and how other people relate to him and don't relate to him. And there is some funny lines about that and characters, kind of giving him a little bit of crap about how goody two-shoes he seems. But the movie is clearly on his side. And the fact that he is such a paragon of justice and virtue and trying his best, and he is not perfect. He has all this strength and all this power, yet he is not perfect. And every decision he makes, he is trying his best. And I think you can really invest in this version of Superman in a way that you can invest in the best versions of Superman. There's also something really lovely about how Gunn makes sure to really accentuate how much Superman does everything he can to save every life he can. And that goes for every person he encounters, but it also goes for creatures he encounters, whether they be massive or tiny. This Superman you can see, always working to save lives. And he doesn't have to give a big speech about that or make a big statement about that out loud. We just watch what he does and we understand. And I think that there's something, very touching about how that's portrayed. I'm really excited to have this movie out and to have this version of Superman kind of leading the way for the new DCU. I had a lot of personal ups and downs with the DCU. I meant the old DCEU this is replacing, but you probably get that. Mostly I was not that into it, but then I thought there was some high highs as well. One of them being James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. So I thought he was a great choice to lead the way here behind the scenes. And I think that this movie really underlines that by showing him kind of playing in a different terrain of superhero movie than he has in the past. Once again, proving that he is great at superhero movies, even if it is something different like this, by showing you the sort of original superhero and why he can still be relevant and why he can still be a character that you can get this invested in. So those are my thoughts on Superman, which of course is in theaters everywhere this week. All right, guys, if you can like and you can subscribe, that would be excellent. I will be back. Take care.